Okay, so we pulled this in and I didn't get a very good picture of the dent before, but basically something had hit it here and shoved this panel in. So went ahead with 36 grit, my little 90-degree grinder, and stripped the paint off so I could weld my stud gun studs here and pop this panel back out. But you can see where it's kind of creased here and pushed up and then bowed in. All this right here is bowed in. It should look like gradual flare like this side, where it kind of just rolls in. And not doing it in. So we're going to take some 80 grit on a 6-inch GA, and I'm going to knock some of this edge down and some of this, I think it's like an E-coat that the stud gun just doesn't like to grab. And the other thing I did was I taped the top of this, since we're such a close line, that I could take 80 and feather this back, and I can sand this a little bit and not worry about scuffing up my plastic. If we sand that, we got to replace it. I can still see we're in here, still in here. So I'm gonna bring a stud gun in here, kind of do these little low spots, weld them on heavy, pull the big dents, and then lighter, the smaller the dings you want to pull out. Be careful, because heating this up will also distort the metal, so you want to be kind of careful there. But we're getting closer. My personal weapon of choice would be a Bondo hog. But instead of a traditional Bondo hog like this, that's a dual action Bondo hog, and it sucks a lot of air and I gotta listen to my air compressor, I personally like to use a buffer with a 8-inch Bondo hog pad on it. I like this because it spins just straight. There's not dual action. It's like the other air powered one, dual action, so as it goes around it does like a little figure 8, where this just spins. I actually like this a lot better. Also, I kind of will sit down sometimes, for one, because I'm lazy, and for two, this thing's pretty heavy, so I can put my arm here and rest it, and so I'm holding the weight up not only by just my arm, but with my leg too, and I could roll this thing real slow. The other reason I really like Milwaukee is that I can you just barely get that thing to go, where a lot of the other buffers are kind of on. I think it's called like a soft start, but you could just barely, especially with the weight on it, really go real slow, so I could kind of get you on the edge and carve stuff, especially if I wanted to get into a body line like this and I wanted to use this. This just spins where the figure 8 or the other air Bondo hog does. So it sits there and kind of bounces the pad off the side of the truck, and personally don't really care for that, so this thing really works. And now we've Bondo hogged that down, wearing a little bit, truck a little bit. Like I say, that fan bowl in this thing really helps to blow the Bondo dust out and away from you. So we're gonna hit this with a little bit of guide coat and sand it with some 80 on a block. Alright, now we're back at it. The next day, we were sanding on this Raptor yesterday. Now putting some icing on this, also known as dolphin glaze, which is a little bit thinner of a material, kind of self-leveling, so it really flows out, fills any pinholes, and kind of. So we're gonna grab some 80 on a block and start sanding on this. So take a little bit of 3/4 inch tape and tape on this line. What that allows me to do is put a little bit of filler here and build this this line actually gets kind of sharp and it fades out right here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sharpen this line up a little bit, build it up a little bit, and then I'll come back and sand that line. But it's a good way to get an edge. So I'll go mix some filler and I'll put a little bit of icing on that corner right here, and then it'll come back down and just kind of fade out. Okay, so now we've got that filler on here, and it's all blocked out with 80 grit. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take some guide coat this one time, and take 180 sanding paper and sand out our 80 grit scratches, because the filler won't shrink back as bad over 180. And it gives me one last time to kind of just dial this in, make sure everything's looking good. So we throw some 180 on my block and we'll get to sanding. So now that that's all blocked out with 180, we're going to take some wax and grease remover, spray on the panel to give it a wet look, and that will allow me to kind of get back and look down the sides and see if there's a whip or wave or anything funky, you know. Kind of resembles putting clear on it without painting it. So we just kind of hose this thing down and then kind of get back and look, give that a second, it kind of flows out, and then you can get back and look and see a little bit right there in the middle. But it gives you a pretty good idea of like a shiny surface to look and see if your fillers or if your panels look good and smooth. I'll have to come back and drill out that hole that got stuffed, but we'll do that before we primer. And that looks pretty good. Pretty happy with that. So we're going to head and wipe that down. Drill out our hole where we got a little bit of filler stuffed into, and then come back and 180 on a DA our 80 grit scratches out, and then I'll 400 this whole area, and then we'll back tape it and primer the entire, or you know, the part of the panel that needs to be primered. Let me grab my DA and I'll sand those scratches out. So now I'm going to take a red Scotch-Brite pad and scuff my edges out a little bit, and when I tape, I'm going to try to put my masking tape here or here, but I don't want to get any primer on any unprepped area, so that's why I take a Scotch-Brite pad and scuff it. And just kind of taking the shine off. I'm not pushing real hard. You know, like there's kind of some scuffs there. I'm going to come back out. Primer won't stick to anything that's not prepped, and it's Scotch-Brite padded or sanded, anything like that. So now I'm going to using wax and grease remover just to get any kind of oil, well, wax and grease, any other kind of oil that could be road tar, just to be safe. I'm doing this before I mask. And then what I'll do, so my area is super clean even when I mask, then we'll come back, I'm going to back tape the door jamb here and here. It's got one little scratch there I need a primer, and then I'll primer this area, probably about like so, and then about like so. Spray a couple coats of primer, but first of all I'm going to go ahead and I've already wiped the bed down, so it's pretty clean. So now I'll get the tape machine, I'll do some back taping on this, and then we'll tape the whole thing. So I'm grabbing some 1.5" tape. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create what I call, or known in the industry as a soft edge. So we take this, go across there like so, upside down. Make sure about half of that's got a good sticky stuck to the door, and then you roll it out like this. Same on the top. Now when you come around goofy stuff like this, it gets kind of a little more tricky, but same differences. So by doing that, when I spray my primer here, is it kind of hits here and doesn't create such a hard edge. So if I was to do this and tape it and then primer up here, I'm going to have the thickness I'm gonna have that edge. The primer will come to the edge of this paint, come up and over, and when I peel it, I'll have a really sharp line that I'm gonna have to try to sand out. But if I do, like I'll spray here, keep my pressure low and do kind of a low spray out, it should create not such a step in my primer. It'll be a little softer, as long as you don't have such kind of way. I'm gonna primer this edge here, and I probably won't get on this a whole lot. I'll have to come back and scuff that a little bit. It still looks a little shinier than I like it. We'll kind of do that, and then the edge of the door, I actually taped my paper right here on the very edge of the door all the way down, so there's no paint can get into this jam and around that corner. I don't want anything around that corner, otherwise you have to try to paint around that corner. This is going to be fine. There's nothing I need to do on the door except for that one spot, and then the entire bed here. So I took some 3/4 inch tape, stuck it in there and rolled it around, and now I'm just going to take my fingernail and kind of push the tape back up underneath. I don't want to get primer on this bed cap, even though we're going to pull it up in the air when that time comes. This is just kind of a safety precaution. I'll probably take some tape, some 2-inch tape, and go like that, and then create a soft edge right on the top of this edge to about here, and then come back out, down, and the same thing on this edge. I won't tape on the actual line. I'll take my tape and like that. So that right there creates a lot softer of an edge than that does. That's a super hard. I could actually get that and feel that with my fingernails. So that's what you don't want. Okay, now we got it all taped up, and got an old tack rag here. I use just tacking some stuff down if I'm gonna primer or paint. Anything small, I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna kind of get any of my old Bondo dust or off our panel. So I'm not gonna spray a whole lot of primer here. I went ahead and taped this down to a rocker and created kind of a little wall, so when I'm priming, my primer will come up and hit this and not go. Idea is it will come up and kind of shoot out, rather it does or not, but I know when I do that it doesn't blow overspray all over the panel next to it. So I'll spray in here kind of lightly, and I'll spray here kind of lightly, and then that'll just be a little dot there. I've got 36 inches of tape from here out, so I shouldn't have a problem with overspray going that way. Same thing here. I won't have to worry about painting that door. I might hang a piece right here just because I'm going to be priming right here. I don't want nothing on there, so I'll probably take another 18 and put it here real quick. And then I got this here, so I'm spraying. It's not going to go over onto the tonneau cover. I created a pocket here, so when I'm spraying this pocket, and all my overspray will land in this area here. That should be pretty good. I'm going to grab a piece of 18 and throw it back up on that door, and then we're going to make some primer. So we're going to use these. It's a Sata primer gun with the 2.0 tip. This upol primer. This the catalyst, and I grab some reducer and a mixing cup, and we're gonna mix up some primer. Okay, so for this is a 4-to-1 mix with the upol. That means 4 parts primer, 1 part catalyst. Maybe reduced 10 to 15%, I believe. So just a splash of this here. That's just a store brand reducer, which is fine for this upol primer. Oh, and the way that these little mixing cups work, so you've got like 1-to-1 mix, so you would go 1 here, and then the next line over you go 1. Go 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 3 to 2-to-1, 4-to-1 with 15%. So if you went to 4, go 4 parts primer, and then the next 4 with catalyst, and the next 4 would be your 15% reducer. So that's the one we're going to use. Being sure to get primer off the side of the cans and off the bottom. I like to drag it along the bottom and see if there's any heavy chunks or buildup, which would look pretty good. So I'm going to go 4-to-1. Got quite a bit of primer so I'm going to mix this up to my mark on 6. I'm going to put about 3 coats of primer on that panel. It's going to be pretty thick because we did some kind of a lot of filler work. So then we're at 4 to 1, but we're at our 6 mark. So we'll take our upol catalyst and run up to the next 6. So then we'll go. You want to try to get that just as close as you can. If you say you went over like just a little bit past your 6, on the next one go a little bit past. Try to get it as close as you can. You know, you don't want to go 6.5 to just 6. If you go 6.5, then go up half mark on your 6. Same thing with the reducer. That way you know you've got as close as you can get on your 4 to 1. So right at this, just a smidge over 6, but that's with the reducer, so we'll be all right. It's like probably like a 17%, which well, I said 10 to 20% on this, but I'm gonna put 3 because I like a little extra primer to sand. I start with a little bit aggressive, more of aggressive sandpaper, like 180, maybe even 180, and then like 500 wet sanded out. So my base, you know, your bases are usually about 500 to 600 grit sandpaper is where you want to finish your primer out. Some guys will go out to 1,000, maybe 800. It just depends on the painter. I've seen guys do 400. 500 is usually a pretty dang good. Same as when we mixed it in the can, you want to make sure you get on the bottom, all around, and drag the sides, and spend about 30-45 seconds just steering. Get all that primer out that we can. Make sure our little hole right here isn't plugged, which it is, so that pain. That little hole's plugged. That means as the primer is leaving your cup, it needs to have air to go back in it, otherwise it'll start spitting and sputtering. So I got this little torch tip cleaner, or these were killer for cleaning your paint guns. Sometimes, yeah, it's just a little torch tip cleaner. It comes with quite a few different size tips. Look through there. See light through there? Pretty good. About to grab my respirator. I don't really want to spray this without some kind of lung protection. So we'll head over to the truck and get this thing primered. All right, first coat of primer is on. I put a kind of a lighter coat over my bare metal and a coat just on my Bondo, kind of a light to medium coat to kind of let it, does two things. It kind of, the filler will absorb some of the primer and you'll see kind of like a little dry area or something after it kicks off. Oh, and the other thing is it gives it kind of a tack coat, a lighter coat to kind of bites in, and then when you put the second coat on, it gets a little thicker. Or you can put a thicker coat on. All right, we got her all primered up and we're gonna let her sit overnight. Come back and guide coat it, peel our paper off and start blocking.